The red and blue lights strobed across the cul-de-sac like a scene from a crime show, except I was the criminal, standing in gym shorts and a paint-stained t-shirt on my freshly swept porch. Karen Sheldrake, president of the Briar Hills HOA and self-declared neighborhood saint, pointed at me like I'd robbed her garden gnome collection. "That's him, officer," she screeched. "He moved out of the HOA without clearance. He's still under jurisdiction." Her voice was sharp enough to pierce glass. I took a breath and folded my arms, already tired. But then a familiar black SUV pulled up, and out stepped Cassidy, my daughter, badge shining on her belt. Before we continue, please drop a like and comment below with your country and what time it is right now where you're watching. Whether it's sunrise in Australia, midnight in New York, afternoon in Canada, or evening in France, I want to know. Don't just sit back, tell me where in the world you are. Now, let's dive into the story. Cassidy Odell wasn't just my daughter. She was a detective for Pine Grove Metro. Tough, fair, and fully capable of shutting down a bully like Karen. As she walked toward us, her eyes flicked between the patrol officers, Karen, and me. "What's going on here?" she asked, voice calm but firm. Karen scoffed. "Don't play dumb. He moved without HOA board approval. He still owes landscaping compliance. And he took that hideous mailbox with him." Cassidy raised one eyebrow. "You called 911? Over a mailbox?" One officer coughed to hide a laugh. Karen's face flushed, but she doubled down. "He's a repeat offender," she cried, pulling out her clipboard like it was a holy document. "Our community bylaws say any resident who sells without completing the exit interview forfeits their landscaping escrow. That's theft." Cassidy glanced at me. I shrugged. "I sold the house 2 weeks ago. I've got the deed and sale records. I don't live in your neighborhood anymore." Karen thrust the clipboard at Cassidy. "He's lying. Arrest him." Cassidy didn't even blink. She turned to the 2 uniformed officers. "You 2 can head out. I've got this one." They exchanged glances, nodded, and left. That's when Karen made her biggest mistake. "I'm not going anywhere until he's in cuffs," Karen snapped. Cassidy stepped forward and said, "Actually, you are." Her voice dropped, her badge rose, and her eyes locked on Karen. "You've filed 4 false police reports this month, trespassed on private property, and harassed my father in public and online. That's enough for probable cause." Karen blinked. "No, you can't arrest me. You're too close to this." Cassidy pulled out a body cam and clicked it on. "I'm documenting this fully. You're under arrest, Ms. Sheldrake. Turn around." For a second, Karen just stood there, stunned, until the panic took over. "You're setting me up. This is corruption. This is personal," she shouted as she backed away. Cassidy moved in step with her, calm and slow like a lion circling prey. "You lunged at me during your last inspection. I have witnesses. We've recorded your unauthorized entry into private property 3 times this week. You misused emergency services. That's not HOA leadership. That's criminal behavior." Karen screamed. Not words, just a frustrated wail like a toddler denied dessert. Then, with neighbors gathering and phones out, she charged. Not smart. Cassidy sidestepped and flipped her down like it was choreographed. Clean and silent. The cuffs clicked into place. Karen screamed about lawsuits, conspiracies, and citywide corruption. "I am the HOA," she wailed, mascara smudging as she thrashed on the curb. Cassidy read her Miranda rights, unbothered. "You have the right to remain silent. I recommend you start now." My neighbors clapped. One guy even whistled. Karen's shrieking only got louder as Cassidy gently guided her toward the unmarked cruiser. "Dad," she said over her shoulder, "we'll sort this out at the precinct." I nodded, still in shock. The moment I had imagined for months was now playing out in real time, and it was far better than I dreamed. But as Karen disappeared inside the car, a thought hit me like a gut punch. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about something deeper. That woman had power over people for years, families scared to plant a flag, seniors fined for untrimmed hedges, single moms bullied over paint colors. Cassidy had just done what no one else could. She cracked the HOA queen's armor. But I also knew this wouldn't be the end. Karen Sheldrake wasn't the type to vanish without dragging someone with her. And she still had allies hiding in plain sight. That night, as I sat alone on the porch, I saw a black sedan slowly roll past my driveway. No headlights. Just creeping silence and tinted windows. It wasn't Cassidy. And it wasn't a neighbor. I stood and watched it disappear down the hill. Something told me this arrest had stirred more than just a bitter woman. It had shaken a hive. One I wasn't ready for yet. But ready or not, they were coming. Karen Sheldrake first sank her claws into me over a lawn gnome, no joke. I'd placed it near my rose bushes because it reminded me of Becca, my late wife. The next morning, I got a citation notice, handwritten, tucked under my doormat. Decorative items must be pre-approved by HOA Design Board. Karen's smug little signature was at the bottom. I stared at the gnome for a while, then tossed it in the garage, heart aching. That was the moment something shifted inside me. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a prison under a petty warden. The fines started piling up like weeds. First it was my trash bin being visible from the road, $1.75. Then my daughter's car parked too long in the driveway, $1.50. I argued, but every time I spoke up at the HOA meetings, Karen cut me off with her plastic smile and condescending tone. You agreed to the rules when you moved in, Mr. Dallin. She never forgot my name, but she always said it like it tasted sour. I wasn't just being fined. I was being erased. The house Becca and I built a life in was turning hostile. Cassidy noticed too. She came by on a Saturday, took one look at the 3 yellow citations on my front door and muttered, "This is harassment, Dad." I shrugged, trying to play tough. They're just rules. But she wasn't buying it. She sat me down and looked me square in the eye. This isn't about lawn height. It's about power. She's singling you out. Cassidy wasn't wrong. At the last HOA meeting, Karen proposed a visual uniformity initiative targeting decorative lights, clearly aimed at my string of vintage bulbs I'd hung in Becca's honor. What truly broke me, though, wasn't the lights or the fines. It was when I saw Karen snapping pictures of my backyard through a gap in the fence. I was grilling burgers for Cassidy and her fiancé, and there she was, like some nosy hawk with a smartphone. I walked up to the fence and stared at her. She didn't flinch. "Unregistered fire hazard," she muttered, walking off. That night I didn't sleep. I just paced, thinking about Becca's laughter under those same string lights, Cassidy playing with our golden retriever on that same grass. It was my home, but I felt invaded. I tried reasoning with the board, sent an email requesting mediation. Karen replied within an hour, saying I could address the board if I paid a $300 formal review fee. Cassidy saw the email and swore out loud. That's extortion. I believed her. But what could I do? The HOA had authority over every nail, bush, and grill. I felt like a guest in my own house. Worse, a trespasser. The breaking point came when Karen fined me $500 for installing solar lights, without permit. I'd placed them in the flower bed to keep the deer away. Now they were a crime. I stood on the porch that night, staring at the empty street. The porch Becca had painted blue. The lights she loved. And I realized something that changed everything. I didn't owe these people my peace. I didn't owe Karen my memories. The house we built together was now infected with her rules, her clipboard, her cold eyes. It wasn't worth the daily battle. I could either keep bleeding slowly from 1,000 paper cuts, or I could walk away and build something new. That thought scared me, but it also gave me a strange flicker of hope. Cassidy didn't hesitate when I told her. "I'll help you move," she said. "But do it quietly. Don't give her a reason to start a war until you're gone." That was Cassidy, always thinking 2 steps ahead. We made a plan. I began scouting properties outside the HO, close enough for work and family, but far enough from Karen's reach. Found a fixer-upper in a quiet pocket called Alder Ridge. No HOA, no board, just friendly neighbors and fenced yards. I made an offer the next day. Accepted in 48 hours. Suddenly, escape was real. I didn't even tell my neighbors I was leaving. Not because I didn't care, but because I didn't want to put them in Karen's crosshairs. I boxed up photos of Becca, folded clothes into bins, and stored them in Cassidy's garage. Every evening, I'd haul out one more piece of furniture under the cover of dusk. I left the front porch untouched until the very last night. The lights still glowed softly, a quiet goodbye. When the moving truck came, it rolled in before 6 a.m., and I was gone by sunrise. Karen didn't even get a whiff. By the time she knocked on my old door, huffing and snarling with her clipboard, the for sale sign had been flipped to sold. And I was sipping coffee on the back deck of my new home, watching birds dance through pine branches. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the sound of high heels on pavement. No Karen. No citations. Just me, Cassidy, and the fresh smell of a life reclaimed. I thought maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was over. I was wrong. The day I found the house in Alder Ridge, it felt like oxygen after years of breathing stale air. It wasn't grand, 2 bedrooms, cracked paint, a slanted mailbox, but it didn't have a board of directors watching every move. No HOA. No Karen. Just freedom. I stood on the porch during the open house, squinting at the backyard. The fence was leaning and the grass was wild, but it was mine if I wanted it. The realtor, a gray-haired lady named Fernley, asked if I was sure. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "Ma'am, I've never been more certain." I didn't even hesitate, made a cash offer that same afternoon and asked for a closing date within 2 weeks. Cassidy helped me draw up the paperwork and handled everything discreetly. "The less noise we make," she said, "the harder it'll be for her to interfere." She was right. Karen thrived on visibility, on watching and being watched. So I disappeared in plain sight. I cleaned out the garage one drawer at a time. I boxed Becca's books during thunder. I took down the family photos late at night. Each picture frame came off the wall like a final goodbye. The hardest part wasn't the packing, it was pretending nothing was happening. Karen still strutted past my driveway every morning at 8:02 sharp, waving at passing cars like a parade marshal. I nodded when she waved, kept my face neutral. I even mowed my lawn to regulation height just to avoid questions. Cassidy said, "Don't provoke her. She's like a lit match in dry grass." So I played dumb. I attended one more HOA meeting, listening as Karen unveiled a new policy banning inflatable holiday decor. I clapped like a good little resident, knowing I'd be gone before Halloween. I sold my house through a private agent. Cassidy knew. No public listing, no HOA bulletin, no yard sign. It closed in 9 days. I moved furniture in shifts, late at night, with the help of my cousin Reeve and a borrowed pickup. Cassidy stored the boxes in her garage. I didn't touch the porch lights until the very last night. Those vintage Edison bulbs were Becca's favorite. She'd hung them one fall, stringing them across the eaves with bare feet on cold concrete. I left them glowing until the truck pulled up. Then, with a lump in my throat, I turned them off. The new owner was a young woman named Callie Monroe, recently divorced, 2 toddlers in tow. She asked me why I was moving. I smiled and said, "You'll understand once Karen knocks." She laughed, thinking I was joking. I handed her the spare keys and left before dawn. The neighborhood was still asleep. Not a single garage door stirred as I pulled away, U-Haul bouncing behind me. I didn't look back, not once. Cassidy met me at Alder Ridge, helped unload everything with a quiet determination. "You sure this is it?" she asked. I nodded. "I'm ready to breathe again." At Alder Ridge, I met neighbors who waved without asking if I had HOA approval for potted plants. I grilled steaks the first night and let the smoke rise freely. My new next-door neighbor, Vernon, peeked over the fence and said, "Smells like freedom." I laughed harder than I had in months. Cassidy dropped by with pizza and wine, and we ate it on the floor surrounded by unopened boxes. "She won't like this," she said, raising her glass. "Good," I replied. Let her choke on the silence. That night, I slept like a stone for the first time in 2 years. 3 days later, Karen showed up. It was morning. I was sweeping the porch when her familiar white Lexus pulled up to the curb. My heart thumped, but I kept sweeping. She stepped out like a prosecutor approaching trial, clipboard already in hand. "You didn't file an HOA relocation clearance," she barked. I blinked. "I'm not in the HOA anymore." Her nostrils flared. Your exit affects landscaping compliance. You can't just disappear. I stared at her. Karen, I moved. You don't have jurisdiction here. She looked around the neighborhood like it offended her. You're still listed in our system. I shrugged. Then update your system. She didn't leave. She walked around my car, jotted down my license plate, and took photos of my front flower bed. Violation of municipal garden setback, she muttered, though I knew that law didn't exist. Cassidy had warned me this might happen. She won't accept the loss. She'll try to control you from a distance. Karen taped a notice to my mailbox. Subject remains under HOA penalty. Ongoing fees apply. I tore it down and burned it on the grill. But I knew then, this wasn't over. Leaving the neighborhood didn't end her reign. It only moved the battlefield. That night, I called Cassidy. She found me. My daughter didn't sound surprised. But now she's trespassing. Document everything. Don't confront. We'll build a file. And so I did. Every time she passed by. Every time she stepped on the lawn. Every fake letter. Every whispered threat. My notebook grew fat with dates and quotes. I even installed a motion camera. Karen didn't just want to punish me, she wanted to pull me back into her kingdom. But I wasn't going back. I was done being ruled by a clipboard and an angry woman with nothing better to do. Still, in the quiet of night, I caught myself looking out the window. Watching. Waiting. Wondering if freedom was just an illusion in her world. Because Karen didn't let go. She buried herself like a weed in every inch of my life. And something told me she was only just getting started. Karen showed up at my new place before I'd even finished unpacking. It was the morning after I moved in, and I was on the porch adjusting the porch swing chain when I saw her white Lexus crawl around the bend like a shark circling fresh blood. She parked without invitation and marched straight toward me, clipboard in hand, sunglasses on like she was the HOA Secret Service. You didn't file a relocation compliance notice, she said without a hello. I stared at her, genuinely confused. I don't live in the HOA anymore. She blinked once. You're still in our database. I almost laughed, but there was something in her tone, like she believed she still owned me. That's your database problem, not mine, I said, keeping my voice even. She sniffed and scribbled something on her form. There's a $900 fine pending for non-compliant mailbox removal. I stared at her. Karen, I removed my own mailbox because I sold my own house. She gave me a smile that didn't touch her eyes. The bylaws say the HOA owns permanent fixtures. Removing it without board approval is considered damage to common property. That's when I knew she hadn't lost power. She was weaponizing it. That afternoon, I got my first letter at the new house. It wasn't even mailed, it was hand-delivered and folded under a rock on my porch. It said, pending compliance violations may result in legal action. It was typed, unsigned, and stamped with the Briar Hills HOA seal. I held the paper in my hands and shook my head. Cassidy was going to flip. I scanned it, filed it, and started a folder labeled, Karen, Post Escape. Over the next few days, the nonsense multiplied. Letters, drive-bys, and photos of my backyard taken from the street. I hadn't escaped. I had been followed. Cassidy came over that weekend and reviewed the letters. She's testing boundaries, she said. She knows it's illegal, but she's hoping you'll cave out of fear or confusion. I wasn't confused, I was livid. My new neighbors started asking questions. Is that lady always snooping in your bushes? One asked. Vernon next door joked about selling Karen decoy garden gnomes with cameras in the eyes. But jokes aside, the tension grew. I started checking my blinds more often. I installed a motion sensor on the side gate. Freedom wasn't supposed to come with this kind of surveillance. Then came the call to my new landlord. I was renting to own, and Karen somehow got the contact info. She told him I was violating property codes and housing disruptive equipment. He's got an unregistered grill and a non-permitted swing set, she reportedly said. My landlord, thankfully, was a retired Marine named Clyde who had zero patience for nosy blondes with binders. Sir, he said to me over the phone, I told her to get off my damn lawn before I called the sheriff. I thanked him, hung up, and realized Karen's reach wasn't just petty, It was strategic. But she wasn't done. 2 days later, I woke up to find a city code enforcement sticker on my mailbox, my new one. It said I was under review for structural non-compliance. I called the city. This was anonymously reported, the clerk admitted. But your property's not even flagged in our system. Cassidy filed a public records request and traced the complaint back to an email domain used by Briar Hills HOA. She's using the HOA as a front, Cassidy said. She's got a paper trail now. That night, I felt a flicker of hope through the rage. Karen had slipped. I started documenting everything more carefully. Every visit she made, every photo she snapped, every word she spoke within earshot. I bought a notebook and wrote the date, time, weather, and what she wore. Cassidy helped me organize it into a formal complaint. She's not just annoying. This is harassment, she said. And if she crosses the line again, I'll make sure it sticks. Still, I could feel it in my gut. Karen was planning something bigger. Petty letters and fake reports weren't her endgame. She wanted to drag me back into her kingdom by force, or break me trying. Then, just when I thought I'd seen every trick in her binder, I found a flyer taped to the power pole outside my house. It looked official, HOA letterhead, gold font, bold letters. Attention residents, HOA policy violations affect us all. Below was a photo of me mowing the lawn with a caption, former HOA member refusing to comply with safety ordinances. I stood there in stunned silence, wind blowing that cheap paper in my hand. I'd been publicly shamed in my own neighborhood, in a place I'd moved to for peace. This wasn't just Karen being nosy anymore. This was war. I took the flyer inside, placed it next to the growing pile of evidence, and sat in the silence of my kitchen. I looked around the house, the one I fought so hard to get to, and realized something cold and painful. Even here, I wasn't free. Not yet. But I wasn't the same man who put up with citations and clipped conversations at HOA meetings. I had Cassidy, I had witnesses, and I had the truth. I didn't know how this would end, but one thing was clear. If Karen was going to drag me back, she'd have to do it in cuffs. And if she pushed one step further, I knew exactly who would be slapping the cuffs on her. The next week, it felt like I was living under siege. Karen's car started circling the block like it was tethered to my property. Sometimes she parked across the street with binoculars, other times she'd just sit and glare like a gargoyle on the dashboard. My new neighbors were polite, but they noticed. "That lady your ex?" one asked. I almost choked on my coffee. "Worse," I replied. "She's my former HOA president." I tried to laugh it off, but my stomach twisted every time her white Lexus idled near the curb, windows half cracked like a predator waiting for permission. One morning, I opened my front door to a strong gust of wind, and a stack of leaflets scattered across the porch. They were photocopied papers titled, "Civic Integrity in Decline, The Danger of Non-Compliant Residents." Guess whose face was printed beneath the title? It had been taken without my knowledge, mid-yawn, watering the lawn. I picked them up one by one, fists clenching tighter with each one. Cassidy found me later, still holding the stack, eyes burning. "She's escalating," she said. "We're officially past trespass. This is targeted harassment." We called it in, but it would take time to stick. Karen wasn't just watching now. She was recruiting. I spotted 2 familiar faces from my old neighborhood handing out flyers near the library. I followed them from a distance, Howard and Lila Barnes, staunch Karen loyalists and HOA diehards. They moved like missionaries, solemn and self-righteous. Cassidy tailed them in an unmarked car and snapped photos. "We're building a pattern," she said. "She's not just harassing you, she's weaponizing your identity to scare the community." I didn't know whether to be furious or flattered. I was just trying to live my life, grill some ribs, maybe plant a few tomatoes. But now I was the villain in her personal newsletter. Then the anonymous tips started flooding city services. A fire inspection notice appeared on my front door, supposedly about flammable outdoor material. Code enforcement arrived days later, expecting bonfires and gasoline cans. Instead, they found a backyard with a basic grill, 2 citronella candles, and a folding lawn chair. They apologized, took a few photos, and left shaking their heads. "This isn't our first Karen case," one officer mumbled. Cassidy smiled when I told her. "Good. That gives us precedent." But still, the stress gnawed at me. I started waking up at 3 a.m., checking the windows. I bought blackout curtains just to breathe. One morning, I found my trash cans turned over and dragged into the middle of the street. At first, I assumed it was kids, but tucked inside one of the bins was a plastic folder labeled Evidence, Dallin Noncompliance Archive. Inside were color-coded sheets with my name, old photos of my former house, HOA meeting minutes, and fake violation forms. It was meticulous, unhinged, and terrifying. Cassidy went silent when she flipped through it. "This isn't just about rules," she said. "She's obsessed. This is personal." My hands trembled. Not out of fear, but rage. I had left her kingdom, and she wanted me punished for it. The final straw came when my neighbor Vernon, sweet old Vietnam vet with 2 hearing aids, was approached in his own driveway by Karen. She told him she was surveying for compliance on adjacent lots. Vernon, bless his soul, pointed to his American flag and said, "Ma'am, the only authority I answer to is Old Glory." She walked off, but not before muttering something into her phone. Cassidy reviewed the doorbell cam footage and confirmed it. She's using a police scanner app to monitor local activity. She's trying to get ahead of every call like it's a chess game. I felt sick. Karen wasn't acting alone, she was orchestrating. Cassidy escalated the case. She started collecting sworn statements from neighbors who'd been approached. One woman said Karen claimed I was running an illegal Airbnb. Another claimed she was asked to report any loud noises after 6 p.m. My daughter built a folder so thick it could have doubled as a courtroom weapon. "It's enough to file for a protection order," she said. I stared at the papers, each one a nail in Karen's paper-thin facade. "Not yet," I said. "Let her make the mistake." Because I knew Karen, knew her hunger for control would push her over the edge. I just had to wait. The tipping point came in the form of a knock at my door, this time from an actual police officer. He looked tired, clipboard in hand. "Sir, we received a 911 call about a disturbance. Screaming, possibly domestic." My stomach dropped. "There's no one here but me," I replied. He checked the porch cam footage and sighed. Caller didn't give a name, but it came from a blocked number. "You've got a file growing at the station." Cassidy showed up 5 minutes later. She knew exactly what it was: a welfare check, false report, a weapon used by bitter people who want cops to do their dirty work. That night, Cassidy sat across from me in silence, her badge on the table between us. "She's not going to stop," she said. "She's going to use the system until it backfires." I nodded slowly. "Then maybe it's time we let the system work." I stood, pulled open the drawer, and placed my notebook beside her badge. It was full, dates, actions, flyers, witnesses. Enough to bury Karen in her own rules. Cassidy leaned forward, determination in her eyes. "One more push," she said. "Just one more bad decision, and we take the gloves off." I smiled. "And we bring the cuffs." It happened on a Tuesday morning. Quiet, gray, the kind of day where everything feels like it's holding its breath. I was halfway through trimming the hedge when I noticed Karen's Lexus parked 2 houses down. It wasn't new, but this time, it had something different taped to the window, a laminated sign that read, "HOA Observation Vehicle, Authorized Survey." My laugh came out dry. Survey? She wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Cassidy told me to let her push herself over the cliff. But I didn't expect her to light the fuse in such a public way. Later that day, a stranger showed up at my porch. He wore a cheap suit and carried a manila envelope. "You Mr. Dallin?" he asked. "You've been served." I took the envelope and stared at the bold print, HOA of Briar Hills versus Davis Dallin. It was real. Karen had filed a civil complaint. Inside were pages accusing me of noncompliance, destruction of property, neighborhood disruption, and ongoing threats to HOA infrastructure integrity. I laughed again, too hard this time. Infrastructure? Was I a walking sinkhole? Cassidy took one look and said, "This is it." She just triggered her own downfall. Cassidy filed a counter-report that same night. Harassment. Malicious prosecution. Abuse of civic systems. We included video of Karen's car circling, audio of her confrontations, signed statements from neighbors, and every fake report we documented. But we didn't stop there. Cassidy forwarded everything to the city attorney's office and the Department of Consumer Affairs. "We're not just playing defense anymore," she said. "We're pressing charges." Let her squirm in the same system she tried to weaponize. I didn't say much. I just stared at the wall, thinking of Becca. She'd never liked Karen. She used to call her Dictator Daisy. 3 days later, Karen showed up in person again. No clipboard this time. Just fury. She marched up to the porch and jabbed her finger in my direction. "You think you're clever? You won't win. I am the HO." Her voice cracked at the end, like something inside her was slipping. I stayed calm. "I don't live there anymore, Karen. You need to leave before this gets worse, for you." She smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You think your little cop daughter scares me?" Cassidy, who had just stepped outside with a coffee in hand, said flatly, "She should." Karen's face turned ghost white. She opened her mouth, closed it, then spun on her heel and stomped off. That was the last time she visited in person. After that, she sent more flyers, this time plastered around town. "Former resident endangering community cohesion." The wording was legalistic, hollow, and desperate. She started quoting obscure municipal codes on Facebook. Cassidy watched from a burner account. "She's unraveling," she said. "I give it 1 more week." I didn't disagree. My phone buzzed constantly from neighbors thanking me for standing up. I wasn't just escaping Karen, I was exposing her. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Clyde, my landlord. "You won't believe what just showed up," he said. Karen had sent a certified letter to his property management company, claiming I was involved in backyard militia activity. She attached photos of a barbecue smoker and 3 old folding chairs. Clyde burst out laughing. "She really doesn't know when to quit, does she?" That night, Cassidy filed the final notice with the city attorney: civil defamation, invasion of privacy, and obstruction of peace. "All we need now is 1 more abuse of authority," she said. "1 more misuse of police resources." We didn't have to wait long. Saturday morning, 6:47 a.m., I was still in bed when I heard the knock. Cassidy had crashed on the couch after a night shift and was already up. A uniformed officer stood on the porch, eyes awkward. "Sorry to bother you, sir. We got a call about someone armed and unstable, matching your description." Cassidy stepped forward, badge flashing. "What's the caller's name?" The officer shook his head. But it came from Briar Hills." Cassidy's expression didn't change, but I saw her jaw clench. "Thanks, officer. You're dismissed. I'll take it from here." The man nodded and left without another word. Cassidy turned to me, eyes cold and sharp. "She just called in a false gun report. That's a felony." I stood in silence, blood suddenly rushing in my ears. "She could have gotten me killed." Cassidy nodded. "Exactly. And now she's finished." She picked up her phone, dialed a number I didn't recognize, and said 6 words I'll never forget: "Activate the arrest file on Sheldrake." It was like watching the storm finally turn toward the one who started it. Karen hadn't just crossed a line, she bulldozed through it. And Cassidy was done waiting. The arrest warrant was processed that evening. Karen didn't know it yet, but her entire kingdom, her flyers, her false reports, her parade of petty power, was about to collapse. She'd cast herself as queen for years. But in her hunger to dominate, she'd made a fatal mistake. She tried to break the wrong family. Cassidy stood at the kitchen table, straightened her badge, and holstered her sidearm. "Dad," she said, "tomorrow morning, I'm going to knock on her door." And this time, she wouldn't be the one answering to anyone. The next morning was still and strangely warm, like the air itself knew what was coming. Cassidy suited up in full uniform, no plain clothes this time. Her badge gleamed in the sunlight as she clipped it to her belt and checked the arrest file one last time. "You sure you don't want me to come with?" I asked. She shook her head. "Dad, she needs to see me, alone, official. No debates." No drama. Just justice. I watched her pull away from the curb, taillights blinking once before she turned toward Briar Hills. Toward the kingdom Karen thought she still ruled. Karen's house was exactly as I remembered it. White pillars, an American flag she used like a shield, perfectly pruned hedges framing a woman with no control left. Cassidy parked across the street, stepped out, and walked slowly up the stone path. Neighbors peeked through blinds. Karen was outside, watering flowers she couldn't name. She looked up and froze. Cassidy approached calmly, hand near her holster, voice calm. Karen Sheldrake? Karen's lips pressed thin. Yes. Cassidy held up the warrant. You are under arrest for filing a false police report, harassment, and misuse of emergency services. Turn around, please. Karen laughed. No, you're not serious. Her voice cracked with denial. Cassidy didn't flinch. You filed a false gun report on a civilian. That's a felony. We have documentation, audio recordings, surveillance footage, and witness statements. Karen took a step back. You can't do this. You're his daughter. This is personal. Cassidy remained stone still. You made it personal when you targeted my father, my neighbors, and our community. Karen lunged for the warrant, screaming, You'll regret this. Cassidy sidestepped, spun her, and had her cuffed before the second syllable left her mouth. It was clean. Final. Public. Neighbors began stepping outside. Phones recorded from porches and driveways. One man across the street clapped. Someone else shouted, Finally! Karen thrashed like a fish in a net. This is a setup. I am the HO. Cassidy remained focused, repeating Karen's Miranda rights over her cries. She placed Karen in the back seat, closed the door, and turned to the growing crowd. This is a matter of public safety. The department appreciates your cooperation. The tension that had ruled Briar Hills for years dissolved into murmurs of disbelief and relief. And for the first time in a long time, Karen had no audience. I got the call 10 minutes later. She's booked, Cassidy said. Magistrates reviewing bond conditions. Press is already sniffing around. I blinked. The press? Cassidy nodded. Local news picked up the arrest log. Her HOA title made it juicy. Within hours, Karen's face was on every TV in town, under headlines like HOA president arrested after harassing former resident and power trip ends in handcuffs. Cassidy was requested for a comment but declined. This isn't about me, she said. This is about every person she's tried to silence. Still, I could tell she felt the weight of the moment. Karen's allies scattered like cockroaches. Howard and Lila Barnes sent an apology letter through a mutual neighbor, claiming they were misled by rhetoric. The HOA board called an emergency session and voted unanimously to suspend all operations pending legal review. They posted a notice online. The HOA of Briar Hills will undergo restructuring under external oversight. It was the bureaucratic equivalent of waving the white flag. My old mailbox, yes, the one she fined me over, was quietly restored by the new homeowner. Vernon from next door mailed me a photo of it with a beer bottle sitting proudly on top. But Cassidy wasn't finished. With Karen in custody, she filed for a temporary restraining order on my behalf and requested a court-appointed review of Karen's past HOA enforcement practices. We may be looking at restitution, she said. She profited off fear and fake fines. You weren't her only victim. Turns out, over a dozen residents had similar stories: fines with no explanation, meetings recorded without permission, and threats of legal action over minor landscaping issues. A class action suit began forming in the background while Karen awaited arraignment. Her reign wasn't just over. It was being dismantled piece by piece. I spent that evening on the porch with Cassidy, the cicadas humming low in the trees, the smell of mesquite wood curling from my grill. I don't know how to thank you, I said. She smiled, took a sip of her soda, and said, You already did. You didn't cave. You taught me what resilience looks like. I looked at my daughter, the badge, the quiet steel in her voice, and realized she had become the kind of woman Becca would have admired. Strong, sharp, unshaken by noise. Karen tried to break us. All she did was sharpen our edge. The next morning, I woke up to peace. Real peace. No cars circling, no flyers on my door, no staged walk-bys with clipboards. My new neighbors waved freely. Even Clyde dropped by with a six-pack and said, "Heard the witch is off the lawn." We both laughed. But inside, I knew something deeper had shifted. I wasn't just free from Karen. I was free from the fear of standing still. Of waiting for someone to tell me I was out of line for living my life. Cassidy made that possible. And in doing so, she reminded me that silence only protects tyrants. That night, before bed, I walked out back and stared up at the sky. The porch light glowed, the wind rustled the trees, and nothing, absolutely nothing, interrupted the moment. I raised a glass to the darkness and whispered, "Thanks, Becca." She won. Because Cassidy didn't just carry a badge. She carried legacy, justice, and every ounce of grit passed down from a mother who once dared Karen to take down her sunflowers. And that, I thought, is how dynasties die, when women with truth and power walk through the gates the tyrants thought they built to last forever. The morning after Karen's arrest, my phone buzzed nonstop. First it was neighbors, some I barely knew, calling to say thank you. Then came reporters. Local news stations wanted interviews. One even asked if I'd do a segment called, "When HOAs Go Too Far." I declined, but Cassidy laughed. You should have seen her face during booking. She tried quoting the HOA bylaws like they were the Constitution. I imagined Karen, still in her gardening gloves, lecturing the arresting officer about Article 3.2 on mailbox maintenance. But no rulebook could save her now. She was no longer the enforcer, she was the cautionary tale. By noon, the headlines had multiplied. One article read, "Badge meets binder, detective arrests HOA president father fled from." Another, "Clipboard queen brought down by daughter with a badge." Cassidy refused every interview. "This isn't about publicity," she said. "This is about accountability." Still, the story spread. Online forums lit up. Former HOA victims from all over the state chimed in, sharing their horror stories about neighborhood tyrants. Karen had unintentionally started a movement. She wanted power. She became a symbol. And the world watched her fall from her self-built pedestal in real time. The Briar Hills community changed overnight. The board dissolved entirely. No one wanted to be associated with Karen's mess. A third-party management company was brought in for basic maintenance. But it wasn't the same. The fear was gone. People painted their shutters blue. One guy built a treehouse without a permit. Another put up a 15-foot inflatable dragon on his lawn. Freedom Dragon, Vernon called it. When I drove through one last time to pick up a misplaced delivery, I didn't feel resentment. I felt relief. They weren't living under her clipboard anymore. They were breathing again. Karen, meanwhile, was released on bail, but she wasn't quiet. Her legal team filed a motion claiming emotional distress and targeted intimidation by law enforcement. Cassidy rolled her eyes. She forgot she recorded herself, she said, referencing the dozens of HOA Zoom calls Karen had uploaded over the years. Cassidy submitted hours of footage where Karen bragged about cleaning out non-compliant residents and disciplining bad aesthetics. In one video, she actually said, "If people don't follow the rules, maybe they shouldn't live here." The prosecutor's office took note. "She built her own gallows," one clerk said. But the bigger surprise came when we learned the city had quietly opened an audit of HOA funds. Karen's HOA collected over $150,000 in special assessment fees over 5 years, and now no one could find where that money went. "Shell accounts, probably," Cassidy muttered. "Wouldn't surprise me if she wrote checks to herself under maintenance reimbursements." The audit uncovered inflated contracts, missing receipts, and several large checks signed by Karen for miscellaneous compliance services. She was no longer just facing harassment charges. She was facing fraud. The clipboard queen had embezzled her kingdom dry. That night, we celebrated, not with champagne, but with ribs and sweet tea on the back porch. Cassidy brought over a cake that said, "Freedom tastes like justice." We laughed until our sides hurt. Clyde joined us, brought a fishing pole just to stick it in the ground next to the grill. "She fined me for this in '09, he said. "I'm reclaiming my trauma." We toasted to porch swings, unruly flower beds, and the right to live without fear of citations. The cicadas sang while the stars came out. For once, peace wasn't fragile. It was solid. 2 days later, Cassidy received a letter from a former HOA treasurer. It was anonymous, handwritten, and heavy with regret. I knew what she was doing, it read. She told us the fines were a tool, not a rule. I didn't speak up. I'm sorry. Cassidy folded the letter gently. Even her own board saw the rot, she said. They just didn't think anyone would ever challenge her. That was Karen's fatal flaw. She believed she was untouchable. But power without compassion always crumbles. She ruled by fear. Cassidy dismantled her with truth. The community meetings that followed were filled with healing. Former residents who had moved away because of Karen returned just to say thank you. One woman cried while hugging Cassidy, saying, "You did what we all dreamed of." But Cassidy wasn't looking for applause. She quietly took her seat at the back of each forum, listening more than speaking. When asked why she did it, she always said the same thing: because no one deserves to live afraid of their own front yard. That phrase stuck. It became the tagline of a nonprofit that formed shortly after, Front Yard Freedom. And as for Karen? She pled not guilty. Her trial date was set for 3 months later. But the evidence was stacked high, her reputation shredded. Her own HOA handbook was entered into the record as an exhibit. Her own words, her own rules, turned against her. Even if she avoided jail time, she would never hold power again. No more clipboards. No more bylaws. No more gates to hide behind. The woman who once ruled with laminated policies now waited for court in silence, stripped of her title, her platform, and the audience she once controlled. Cassidy called it poetic justice. I just called it peace. The morning of Karen's trial, the sky was the brightest blue it had been in months. Not a single cloud. Just sunlight pouring over pine fences, cracked sidewalks, and front yards finally free to be whatever their owners wanted. I walked barefoot out to the mailbox, yes, the same one she fined me over, and pulled out a letter from the city. It was a formal notice: Karen Sheldrake permanently banned from holding any leadership in residential governance. I stared at it for a while. Then I laughed. But, free. It echoed down the street like a release. Cassidy stopped by that afternoon. She was off duty, in jeans and a t-shirt, hair in a ponytail. "It's over," she said simply. She took a plea deal. No jail, but 5 years probation, full restitution, and community service. I raised an eyebrow. What kind of community service do clipboard tyrants do? Cassidy smirked. The city assigned her to litter pickup outside the very courthouse she once quoted bylaws from. The irony was so sharp it could have sliced through her old laminated signs. We didn't throw a party. We didn't gloat. We grilled ribs and played dominoes under porch lights instead. People started coming by again, neighbors old and new. Vernon brought homemade lemonade and asked if I'd help him build a tool shed without a permit. "I want to live dangerously," he said. We laughed until we wheezed. Cassidy installed a new flagpole out front. Not because we needed one, but because it meant something again. It flew, a simple white flag with one word: free. No HOA forms. No inspections. Just fabric in the wind. I hadn't realized how heavy the air used to be until it felt this light. Even my breathing changed. Like my lungs remembered what peace was. I finally planted Becca's favorite flowers, zinnias, right along the porch where she once sat reading cookbooks she never cooked from. Cassidy helped, her hands deep in the soil, eyes glassy but smiling. "She'd love this," she said. "Yeah," I replied. She'd love knowing the woman who hated sunflowers ended up weeding courthouse sidewalks. We stood in silence, dirt on our arms, sun on our backs. The wind picked up. The chimes Becca left behind danced in tune. Cassidy looked at me and whispered, "You know what freedom looks like? It looks like this. All of this." That fall, Front Yard Freedom opened 3 more chapters across the state. Cassidy was invited to speak at a national HOA reform conference. She declined the keynote. "Let someone else talk," she said. "I've done enough speaking. I want to listen now." I watched her from the back of the room at a local meeting, Quiet, observant, proud. People brought stories, not lawsuits. They brought hope, not fear. It was beautiful. Nobody wore matching hats. Nobody passed around rulebooks. They passed cookies. Laughter echoed. Community didn't need control. It needed kindness. Cassidy helped them remember that. And I got to witness it. A reporter came by a few weeks later. Wanted to do a follow-up piece. I let her in, showed her around. She asked what I'd say to someone afraid to challenge their HOA. I paused, then said, "They don't own your voice. Or your mailbox. Or your porch swing. You get one life. Don't waste it letting a stranger define your piece." She smiled, scribbled something down, and asked if I'd do a podcast. I laughed. "Only if I can record it barefoot with a beer in hand." She said that was the most American answer she'd ever heard. The seasons turned. Karen faded from headlines. Her house went up for sale. No HOA mention in the listing. Just a tired white house with a broken clipboard still hanging from a nail in the garage. No one bought it for months. Eventually, a single mom with 2 boys moved in. She planted wildflowers, let the grass grow free. First week, she knocked on my door. "Hi," she said. "Just wanted to let you know, I'm not a clipboard kind of neighbor." I grinned. Welcome home. It felt like something sacred had healed. Not erased, but rebuilt stronger. Cassidy still visits every Sunday. We sit on the swing, watch the sunset, and talk about nothing important. That's the best part. No legal filings. No affidavits. Just life. Vernon sometimes joins us with stories too wild to be true. One time, a kid on a scooter launched off my porch ramp and shouted, "This place is awesome." I nearly cried. All the years of tension and fear dissolved in that one voice. "This place is awesome." He didn't say, "perfect." He said, "awesome." And that's all I ever wanted, for this home to be lived in, not controlled. Now, when I step outside, I don't scan the street. I don't check for cars. I don't glance at bushes or rooftops for cameras. I just walk. Water my zinnias. Wave to neighbors. Breathe. That's what freedom looks like. Not fanfare. Not flags. Just the quiet knowledge that you belong to yourself again. Cassidy calls it closure. I call it beginning. Because when tyranny dies, true peace doesn't feel loud. It feels earned. And every time Cassidy hugs me goodbye, badge tucked at her side, I know that no matter what happens next, we ended it right.